Hey, this is Amy from Motif Music Studios, and this is another Friday live stream. And today I thought I would chat about how I teach rhythm differently than I used to. So if you're here, whether you're here live or on the replay, just feel free to say hello when you get here, and it's always good to be here. So I thought I'd start with a few fun facts, and if you're joining in, you can let me know your fun facts. So, really, I love teaching music. I've taught for a long time. If you're new here, I started because I had really wonderful mentor teachers. So, I was actually 17 when I had my first students, and I still remember those students and thinking, wow, I probably would have paced their learning differently, but I'm so thankful that I hope that I gave them a spark of enthusiasm for music. And I love that we can continue to grow and change as teachers over the years. So, something that I was thinking about is how I used to teach rhythm versus how I teach it now. And I'm a big supporter of I don't think there's a real wrong way to teach most things. There might be some ways that are maybe more refined, or I am pretty a stickler for a healthy approach to music making when it comes to a physical approach, but there's lots of different ways to teach these concepts. So I feel like I'm here to learn as well. So if you're here as well to learn, that's fantastic. And I hope I'll learn from you too. So, the first thing that I used to think when I was teaching rhythm is would, um, I'd maybe go a little slower with rhythm. So, if a method book taught just quarter notes for a long time or just half notes and whole notes, I would stick to that plan, which isn't a bad idea if you're just getting started teaching. You can stick to a method book plan. That's fabulous. But one thing that I love to do now is I love to go a little bit crazy and do stuff ahead of time so that we're actually learning rhythms before we ever see them. So I'll just walk you through some of the things I do, and I hope you'll join in and let me know what you're doing in your studio at as well. So the first thing that I like talking about is beat versus rhythm. So I often even myself interchange these new ideas. Hello, if you're just hopping on, come on into the virtual living room here. So when I'm talking about beat with students, I talk about like that heartbeat of rhythm. So that steady pulse that might go slow or it might go fast. And I actually made a little graphic up for this today too. And I'll see if it shares it here. So, yeah, so I talk about the heartbeat of rhythm, and I often have students like jog in place and then we feel their pulse and we try to find it and feel if it's going fast or slow. So we talk about how ideally our heartbeat is going mostly steady, and sometimes it might be faster and steady, and sometimes it might be slower and steady. So that's the first thing that I do. And I love getting people moving to the beat. So that might mean getting up and walking to a song that I play on the piano or a listening piece. And I love to rest in some of these concepts longer than I used to as well. So I would go, oh, yeah, like how can we experience beat? I have lots of drums on hand. I might grab a set of drums or some rhythm instruments, and we might tap along and have students experience that. I also encourage people to kind of read the room. Some students will really need to move around, and some students might just want to sway quietly or tap quietly. So we can kind of read what our students need. So the first thing we chat about is that heartbeat of music. And then I love talking about how the beats are subdivided. So we might spend a bit of time lining them up, and I've got a whole note on the screen and going, okay, that gets 4 beats, and then we can divide it into half notes, and we see how that shows the heartbeats that are inside of those rhythms right away. So that's just a fun way of hearing music right away, moving to music right away. And then I don't always have them visualize the beats right away. So for some students, they'll want to see how that looks. And for others, they'll say, like I can just tell that they might want to experience it more just spontaneously. So the next thing I do, and if you're here live, just say hello in the comments. I'd love to know who you are and how you're doing this morning. Oh, yeah. So I love this from doing grown up stuff. A lot of your musical theater kids really need to move around. There's always diversity. Yeah, that's such a good point. And when working with musical theater, I love that you can stomp the rhythm, and that really builds on how to sing and how to express music when you've got that basis of beat and rhythm right away. And this would also, one of my next things would probably apply to musical theater as well, is I like to do next a lot of rhythm echoes, and that works well whether you're in private lessons or whether you're in a group and doing musical theater. So that's kind of a whole body approach. So I might do things like ask questions in rhythm, but usually I'll start with something like, I know we have food rhythms. I'll show this to the screen. So I have a laminated food rhythms. If people are, I do have some with food avoidance struggles. So then I might choose nature or something that they love, like Minecraft. And we might go like ice cream or hamburger, hot dog. And they would echo the rhythms back and forth. So I find that is a really great way to assign words. We always have to talk about how we articulate words, though, and that's another great thing for musical theater, but also for just listening to rhythm. I might say watermelon, and somebody else might say watermelon or something like that. That's a bad example, but you know what I mean. So then we would talk about how we would say it. And from a very young age, students can get the idea of like saying their name, Amy, and they can decide whether they want to hold the sound or Amy. So we do a lot of that back and forth. If there's a student who likes asking questions, I let them ask me questions with rhythm, like, what's your favorite color? And then I would answer them in a rhythm. And that's a great thing too for parents and families who are on the go and want to add music learning to what they're doing and just be chatting back and forth in rhythm. So that's kind of fun there too. So that's, yeah, the phrases high school band teacher is still with you today. Yeah, I love that those really stick with us, don't they? And yeah, it's a powerful teaching tool to use that like rhythm idea. And so those are just a few of the ways I get started with rhythm. And again, I have no judgment if someone uses a really systematic introduction to notated rhythm. And again, some will start on the page. It's just my preference lately, and what I'm seeing is to do lots of spontaneous rhythm work before students see it. And lots of moving to the music, lots of other instruments. And the other thing I love is that I used to not introduce something like 16th notes for a long time. I would stick with the easier rhythms. And now I might, introduce huckleberry. Like often we have blackberry season, huckleberry, huckleberry, huckleberry pie. And students can clap that and move to it. And so when they see it notated, all of a sudden it just is like, oh yeah, I totally know that sound. Now, in college, I did use words like taka taka. Some people say tika tika, taka taka. My mouth likes taka taka, but we also play around with that with students, like where their tongue is going back and forth. And that's another great musical theater thing, is feeling how we would say rhythms if we were doing like ta, ti, ti, taka taka ta, and seeing how it feels in our mouth and what's the easiest one for us to say fast. So I do use those syllable approaches too, and I love how it just can sometimes assigning number values gets quite confusing for students. Again, other students might love to count. So if you're in the comments, let me know if you loved like counting as a student and writing in the counts and you had that more analytical approach, or if rhythm was always kind of a bit of mystery. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. So the next thing I always say is becoming a keen observer. I think earlier in my teaching career, I would like have an idea in my mind and I would just try to enact that idea. And I think that it has value to it when you're first starting out, having a plan. But now I'll take cues from students. So if I see that they're super enthused about asking me questions and echoing back, we might move that to the key and I might start to say, you know, do you have a pet? Or something like that. And they might answer with, I have a Labradoodle or something. And we might try to clap that or stomp that. So those are some things that I also take cues from the student in front of me when it comes to rhythm. So thank you all who are joining in today. And I love that Hayden I know we haven't heard from VTech, but I'd love to hear what pieces you're working on right now. I know you're arranging music for children's music and with hopes of finding some of those bigger companies that need music. So that's nice to see you here, Hayden. And so the next thing that I love when we're thinking about rhythm is, let's see. Yeah, so we talked about first finding the beat and exploring that. Then we talked about vocalizing rhythms. And for voice teachers, I know you use lots of like tongue twisters and things like that to see how rhythm can feel in our mouths and how to articulate things. I know, Joey, here you've done a lot of speech arts, I believe, and voice training like that too. The next thing we talked about is stomping, clapping, tapping. I love body percussion, so I love getting students using the world around them. I'm teaching in this 24 square foot closet. It's not even a walk-in closet. So I'm like literally using shelving, tapping, and using a small space, but I really love it. The next thing that I recommend is when you get into using visuals, you can pretty much use anything. I know back years ago, I used to teach music for young children, and they did something like music stories, where out of pipe cleaners, we would have half notes and popsicle sticks were taws, and students would build their rhythm pathways. So they called them music stories. You could call them music paths. And so that was for an active student that might need to just get up off the piano and lay rhythms down in front of them. And that was also really valuable. And I still do that now. You can also use flashcards. And these are from www.teachingkidstosing.com. And they're just these really lovely big flashcards. So I use these often. And my own kids have been lining these up in the hallway. And it's been neat to see them, T, 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 ta, rest, and going over that and making their own rhythms. And then later, for me, that starts to build into composing and improvising and notating music theory. So it can build into lots of things. I also love Wendy Stevens. I'll link this in the video description if I can find it. She has like a leveled rhythm that was one of her freebies years and years ago, but it has rhythm starting at the easiest and going to like a level 10 rhythm. And I know 4-star sight reading and stuff, there's resources like that. That's something I also use if I get transfer students. So lots of you will be thinking, oh man, I got this student and they're really struggling. I have no idea what they know. So I'll often say to students, hey, let's start here. And I might do echo rhythms. We might practice like reading them, clapping them. And I'll see if they're understanding the visual rhythm and they're just like really solid on that, or maybe they're really good with their ears, but they don't know how to translate that. So there's a few things I use, and that's one of them, that you can check rhythm and say, okay, let's start here and let's see if every week we do these rhythms, if we can get even to a farther level than we are in piano. So I love that. And Hayden says here, yeah, I loved Hayden here played at the baseball game. That was super fun. I hopped over to that video and that was really neat to hear. Yeah, it is cool. There's so many ways that we can get excited about rhythm, and you can tell I'm an excitable person, and I also read the room with my students. So sometimes I come in with big energy with some students, and then some students I have to like tone it down, make it very calm and slow, and we just work away quietly. And that's good practice for me because I'm often really hyped. So I'd love to hear, as a person, do you feel that you're very energetic, that you come across energetic and enthusiastic, or do you have more of a quiet, calm presence? I'd love to hear how you feel about that one. So the next thing that I do lots of, if you're looking for students, rhythm on the move, and this would apply in like group classes or musical theater classes, piano classes, is scavenger hunts and treasure hunts. And I used to do that lots when teaching groups. Is I'd hide rhythms all over the room. They would run, find a rhythm, come back to me, clap it, and then head out to find another one. So it just kept a fun energy. Now I do work with lots of diverse kids, and so I will warn that sometimes a very upregulating activity like that can be fun, but you'll want to watch for changes in vocal tone. If the pitch gets higher or students are getting more big with their bodies, that's a good clue to like kind of tone down and start cycling into a more regulating activity right away, and have that as part of your lesson plan if you're working with groups. So treasure hunts, and then scavenger hunts can be small too. So I might take a book. Here's the Five Finger Jazz by Brock Chart. And you might find rhythms, have them search for rhythms, hold up a card and then have them scour the score. And that's a way of connecting then the internal music to that external notated score. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is just quickly writing rhythms is another really fun thing. And this was good for me to slow my roll when I started teaching online. Is I started having students just grab a piece of paper or a notebook beside the piano and a pen. It didn't have to be formal. The notes don't have to be small and neat. Or if they had a whiteboard, which is less resistance for a student with motor control struggles or low tone in the hands. And again, I work with lots of diverse learners. So I might clap a rhythm and they might practice notating rhythm. And again, having it so that at first there's not real rules surrounding it. They can do it big, they can explore. They also love writing a rhythm for me. So again, gifting autonomy to students is something I talk about all the time, is having students do something that you have to do. They also love clapping a rhythm that I have to figure out what they clapped. And I'll give you a secret, is that that's sometimes hard, because as teachers, we might do a structured rhythm in our head and students might do one that doesn't always make a ton of sense. So for me, that like puts me on the hot spot, but they love laughing at my attempts if I get it wrong. So that's something else, is just becoming the student when you're working on rhythm. So next, I thought we'd chat about some resources, some ways to have students listening to rhythms that aren't always so precise and straight times. So the other thing that I do differently than when I first started is I used to stay pretty square with my rhythms, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and not introduce swing. And now I tend to dive into some swing right away. And I love that even if students aren't playing from a jazz book or something more pop styled, they love to listen. So I might get them to tap along while I play something fun and lively and energetic. So I love Christopher Norton's resources for that. I love grabbing Brock Chart's resources. Martha Meyer's been a favorite here for years with her Jazz Rags and Blues series. Those are other like listening pieces. So if you want to add more listening to rhythm to your studio, I would say grab those resources that you maybe haven't looked at yet for a while and play them, and even start with finding the beat. And it could be a Mozart sonata or something too. And then you can work into some swing rhythms. So that's something I also do early on now when it comes to rhythm work that I didn't used to do. So another resource for rhythm, and again, I'd love to hear if you have rhythm resources that you're using in your studio really successfully. Be sure to drop them down, or if there's been a takeaway of something that you think you'll use from today, that's always great to hear as well. So, oh yeah, I meant to share that. So I also use Lap Tap Clap by Andrea Dow. This is the book 3, Lap Clap Tap Revolution, and I'll give you a sneak peek here. It has actual rhythm score, so notated score for students to follow the top line, and then a teacher part. I've actually recorded this on the channel as well, Castle Hill Kick. And she has some book club ones of this. So again, finding rhythm resources, then taking the rhythm away from the keys where they're not also trying to have to read notes and figure out their bodies with that is a great way of moving with music. And it's a great thing for this time of year. I know in our community, it's lots of dancers and lots of sports at this time of the year. So I try to take a no guilt approach. If a student isn't as practiced, I say there's always stuff we can have fun with. So we'll grab a rhythm resource or we'll create our own music. We always make use of the time. And then the other resource I have used for years, this is the Christmas one, but Wendy Stevens has Rhythm Cup Explorations. She has a bunch of them, rhythm menagerie, rhythm manipulations, and those are to use, excuse me, solo cups. So using those fun cups and sliding them around. I'll see this is Deck the Halls, but again, it's notated score that is focused on rhythm. And that's, again, great for group classes, for summer camps. Actually, Joey, if you're teaching some musical theater camps too, these are terrific resources, and they're all digital files as well from Wendy Stevens of Compose Create. So that's neat. Oh, that's neat. Hayden's here, and you've got some other videos that critique music from the toys featured in my videos. Oh, that's great to know. I'll have to take a peek because that good music for kids' toys is so important because that's part of their music literacy as well. I love that. Yeah, that's great, Joy. Yeah, it's really fun to be able to just use rhythm in new ways. So I love that. The other thing popular is bucket drumming and grabbing rhythm instruments. I have a variety of rhythm instruments here, and it's a great away from the keys activity. I have my rhythm frog, who's a real favorite, and I have a couple sizes of him, and one of them I actually got from Thailand, which was fun. And this guy's not from Thailand from me, but the other one I picked up when I was in Thailand many years ago. The other thing I've done in our piano groups is, even though we do one-on-one like piano lessons for me or theory, music theory, we've also had rhythm-focused workshops. So that's something super fun to bring the bucket drums, really focus on rhythm understanding in like a 1-hour group class that's really hands-on and really focused on improving rhythm. And I sometimes find having that like group class focused on that topic is a great way to like level up the rhythm in your own studio. So I just love that. And I've already mentioned the sequence rhythm sheets. Now counting concepts, that's different. That's almost a whole other topic. Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's cool. You have a rhythm frog. I love them, right? They're so fun. So I also do count traditionally. So as much as I do ti 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 ta, rest, and taka taka taka, I also do count, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. However, I have a little confession. I don't like counting. So I'd like to hear from you. Are you a counter? That being said, I feel like I'm a fairly rhythmic person. And one of my tricks to that is I do a lot of rhythm analysis before I touch a piece. If something looks really tricky, I tap it out, I figure it out, I make sure that I know how to understand it, and then I leap in. So it's not that I don't count, but I will say it is very rare for me to ever count from beginning to end. And I know that's like a huge faux pas with some of you. So let me know. Let me know if you would count right through a piano piece or if you have different approaches. And I think it also follows for me for the metronome. And I do teach my students how to use a metronome. I actually use it more as a fun thing at the beginning, like finding it, see if we can tap a steady beat or one note. I definitely don't recommend just turning on the metronome and trying to play a whole piece with the metronome. That's like a unique form of torture to me, but everyone's different. So I'd love to hear from you. The other thing I love is, I'll pick this up again, is Brock has these beautiful, like, actual band created backing tracks, and that's a really musical way to have students start to play with a track or with a duet partner. Those are other ways you can nurture that steady pulse in ways that aren't always playing with a metronome. But again, some people thrive on that, and I read the room on that too with my students. There's students of mine that love to know that they can play every note with a metronome, and I will nurture that and I'll encourage that. For me, I do spot checks. I check tempo and I internalize it a lot, and that's just my approach. I did find it interesting though when I was doing lots of recordings that I could record the same piece many, many times trying to get a perfect take, and it's sometimes within even a 3-minute piece, I'll end the recording and go, "Oh wow, it's like 3 minutes and 2 seconds," and they're almost always in the same 5-second range of how I played it in the other attempts at the piece. So it was interesting to see that internally I am following some sort of internal pacing there, but I do like rubato a lot, so I confess. Anyways, I'd love to hear what your most daring, this is totally off topic, but what's the most daring thing you've ever done that's family friendly here today? So I'd love to hear. I haven't done much daring things. You can see me. I'm a piano teacher. I teach from my music closet now. We have a small hobby farm, so we have some Dexter mini Jersey cows of my mom's, and we're out there feeding them and the chickens. So kind of a rustic lifestyle right now. Long ago, I did rappel off a 172-foot bridge, and I'm glad I said yes to that because that's kind of my only big daring thing. But I'd love to hear if you've done something daring recently or in your past. The next thing that I was going to talk about today is improvising is another great way to have students embrace rhythm. And I find that they can create rhythms that they might not know. So again, give room to explore rhythm in ways that aren't sticking to the score always, because you'll find out how rhythmic they actually are. So for instance, when I do those little blues grooves like this, I'll play this and the students can improvise with the blues scale. And I always find they can do a lot of syncopated rhythms just by hearing it and doing it. So finding value today, if you're finding value, feel free to give this a like and tell other people about it. Before we go, what word would you describe yourself as a teacher? What's a word? Oh, I love that, Hayden says they love roller coasters, and you know what? I've never been on a roller coaster, so that's gonna have to be on my bucket list for sure. My nephew went bungee jumping for the first time, and I gotta say, I just don't know if I have the adrenaline after having 3 little boys to do bungee jumping or yeah, or jumping out of a plane with a yeah, skydiving. I don't think that's on my list, but I'd love to hear if it's on your list. So thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. It's been such a fun time. I hope that there's been value for you and it'll get you thinking of ways that you can add more rhythm into either your own playing or that of your students. So thanks for hanging out with me today, and we'll see you again next time.